This is the ATI Pod.
Hey, everybody here on the live feed with ATI Podcast. We are back again for episode 41. We've got a very special edition of the ATI Podcast, ATI Podcast for President, an election day special. So as you may know and seen all the ads, whether you wanted to know or not, we are in the midst of a midterm election. Everybody will be voting on Tuesday if you haven't already voted early. But I'm sure there'll be polling places open tomorrow on Friday for you to vote early if you wish. Voting places probably early on Monday as well. But Tuesday is the day, and that is the 8th. And so let's make sure we get out there and we vote. It's a very important midterm election.
It's going to determine and decide a lot of things, honestly, especially
a lot
control.
Of key Senate seats up.
Right.
And there could be some, volatile turnover, quite frankly.
Right.
We've talked about it here on this show, but some of the things that the Democrats have done specifically that were, in my opinion, stupid political moves was investing in very, alt-right candidates and Trumpians and putting a lot of money into their campaigns and their primaries on purpose because they felt like that they were candidates that they could beat more easily because they considered them more extreme candidates. And I think a lot of that's going to come back to bite people in the ass because even in a lot of the primaries, that strategy actually did not work out to their favor as they suspected would. And if you recall, in our earlier episodes, we brought up the example of Claire McCaskill and Todd Akin, where this actually kind of started historically. We have Missouri to blame, and Claire McCaskill specifically. So thank you, Claire McCaskill. Fuck off.
You raggedy old bitch.
Yeah.
Anyway.
So that's going to set the table nicely.
Yeah, sad state of affairs.
Nicely for our discussion today.
Yeah. Hey, so this is going to be a very calm, collective, educational. I've been recently getting into ASMR, so we're going to, throughout the entire podcast, we're going to be thinking about different noises that we want to make that might want us to release from our bodies and kill every one of them.
Is everybody else not at least marginally creeped out by ASMR videos? I feel like I should be turned on, but I'm not.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
Especially the balloon humping ones. Those are pretty crazy.
Well, you're talking about ASMR porn now.
Oh, so okay. My bad.
I'm talking
cake farting porn.
Oh.
Now we're getting into a whole new subject. Let's talk about something happier than politics. Do you want to watch a woman take a shit on a fucking pot pie?
I mean, that's relevant to Claire McCaskill.
Yeah, that could be true as well. Proper intro here, of course. If you've never listened to the show before, my name's Barrett, host of the show. We got Josh here as usual, co-host, and we got Mr. Knobnard / Brandon / Holeboy / owner of Ed Oz Imperius Emporium, chief political strategist for the ATI Podcast. Brandon Stewart, how you doing, sir?
Well, you picked the wrong fucking guy for this.
So we just kind of want to lay the foundation for how we're going to tackle things today. So I feel like there's a timelessness to how we're going to present things today in the sense that we're just going to go through like the major political talking points, issues, things that are always on the major political platforms where people stand, that sort of stuff. Because as we've talked about before, sometimes we're not completely transparent in what our own political beliefs are. We talk about the sociology around political maneuverings and ongoings. And we've spoke ill, obviously, of Donald Trump, Ron DeSantis, and those types of folks, Governor Abbott in Texas. But we've also spoke ill of people like Claire McCaskill and Joe Biden.
Joe Byron.
Yeah, Joe Byron. Let's go, Brandon.
Yeah, hey, man, every time I heard that, I was like, man, thanks, guys. I appreciate it.
You're feeling really motivated.
I don't understand that they keep on congratulating me, but yet I only have 437 subscribers to my channel. I don't understand.
what we're going to do today, like I mentioned, we're going to go through our political stances, talk about some major topics. There are going to be some ads from our sponsors today.
Oh, yeah.
Now, if you're with us on the live feed right now, unfortunately, you're not going to hear those ads. You will hear them in the post-production version of the show. So don't be thrown off by the fact that at some point I'm going to say, and now a word from our sponsors.
Barrett didn't want us to talk about this, but we did shell out a lot of money. These individuals have been on the campaign trail for quite a while, so we got some guest appearances in there. Just wanted to let you know that all that merch has been bought up, the 3 shirts that we've sold. I believe that we took that money to get these sponsors on here today. So
I think you have it. You got it backwards. Sponsors pay us. So,
oh, wait a second. Well, we had to pay them because they're Republican.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's how it
we had
works.
to do business.
Yeah.
We had to do some crooked business dealing. So you may hear some right-leaning political ads today, and bless you for hanging in tight and listening to them. So now that we've kind of mentioned some of that, let's get into it. So kind of the first major topic, we're just going to get kind of the obvious ones out of the way that we've talked about here on the show quite a few times. And one of our first political stances that we've agreed upon, if we, ATI Podcast, were to be president, is we're going to decriminalize marijuana, mushrooms, shrooms, and other psychedelics.
Absolutely.
I think that there's a lot of people in jail specifically serving long sentences unnecessarily for nonviolent drug crimes, and the majority of them are involving these specifically.
And it plays into the for-profit private prison systems that, the narcotic game of, it's a cat and mouse game. Once you get wrapped up in the game, you're in and out of the system.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean?
It's
ridiculous.
A product of the failed war on drugs.
Right.
From the Reagan administration, even really you can go back to Nixon was really the beginning seeds of that. But
if anything, we should have taken his fucking jelly beans away.
Absolutely.
I mean, he was so addicted to those fucking things. That's the only thing he ran off of.
I thought Jelly Bean was the name of his monkey.
Just like Diet Coke for Trump.
Wasn't that the name of his monkey?
I mean, he ate that.
I think you're talking about
he ate that too.
tomato ketchup with Trump.
Oh, that's Trump. No.
Yeah.
We're talking about Reagan and Jelly Bean.
Ketchup and Diet Coke. Well, I brought up Diet Coke.
Yeah.
Ketchup, Diet Coke.
By the way, for any of our younger audience,
Sustenance.
Google bedtime for Bonzo, and you'll get the chimpanzee reference with Reagan. So I think that's a pretty obvious one. Now, the next motion in this platform is to legalize recreational marijuana federally.
Yep.
So that just...
I think that goes without saying.
Yeah, it goes without saying. And then obviously kind of the tag on to that, once again, would be to impose a flat tax rate on the sale of all of these goods.
Right.
So obviously the word tax sometimes is a touchy subject. However, I think most people would agree that for infrastructure in this country to move forward and have any type of quality road systems, bridges, that sort of thing,
right,
we have to have tax dollars to fund those projects.
Yep.
And I know if you've...
Well, wait, that money doesn't just come out of thin air from Jesus?
No, we print it.
I thought that it did. I thought he said something about 37 pieces of gold will fall every single time that we save a baby.
The burning bushel was actually Jesus burning it at both ends, right?
Yeah.
So,
man, fucking rip that motherfucker.
And we pray for our permission, and then he tells us if we can print it or not.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, makes sense.
So we're going to collect a tax. Now, some of this I'm going to leave a little open ended because it's negotiable. Like, I would think something in the 3 to 6% tile, which is not obscene compared to like what a sales tax rate is on these goods. But obviously that'll help fund government projects. And the reason that I think it's important to mention that we're going to be laying some tax plans into our policy is because it's going to fund some other things in our policy that you'll see here momentarily whenever we get to it. So to alleviate some things financially as well for us as a country, specifically on the criminal justice end of things, immediately release all incarcerated non-violent drug-related offenders.
I agree.
From the prison system.
100%.
Stemming from marijuana, mushrooms, psychedelics, even if it's possession, sale, distro, expunge all their records for first-time offenders. And then we'll say a staggering classification based on if they're second-time offenders, third-time offenders, so on and so forth.
Yeah.
Now, obviously, you can't fix stupid. And if you were sailing and distroing with 10 feet from a school and to minors, and those are just like really terrible decisions. That's poor decision making. And especially if you've been apprehended more than once, I think that perhaps, yes, we may have to have a more progressive conversation about where you need to be in the criminal justice system. But again, I think it's a reasonable policy.
Yeah, it's a common sense policy.
I think, and the other thing that I wanted to touch on for anybody that listens to it and does not share our beliefs, any individual who has been in, this is my standing view, campaign What am I again?
You are the chief political strategist.
That guy. See, I don't even know my title, so good luck.
You're about like 4th or 5th in the food chain.
Yeah. I'd rather be number 10. I like to sit over there and drink a beer. For anybody who might be asking the question, well, what about people who have gone to prison, they've adjusted to prison life, and now they're violent? I believe that all of those personally should go through a course to make sure that they are still nonviolent to be able to get out.
Right.
But
Such as an anger management sort of training. Or
A rehabilitation.
Not prison.
I mean, that's
an actual rehabilitation, Josh?
That's what I'm saying.
And guess what? You're going to hear that word a little bit more and more as we go in. So I know we're early on in our talk here, but just one more item I want to address before we get a word from our sponsors. And this kind of ties in exactly with what we've been talking about here. And that is establish federally funded drug rehabilitation centers.
Absolutely.
I think that is imperative in this country, whether it's one of the most underfunded things in this country without question.
Absolutely.
Everybody knows it. Addiction is a disease,
Mhm.
and people don't realize it unless they've been impacted by addiction, whether they personally were addicted to something or had a loved one in their life.
Right.
Addiction is a disease.
Yep.
It is often hand in hand, overwhelming majority of the time. People who are addicted to things, even if it isn't drugs, there's psychological components tied to that. They need the proper help. Health in general is one of the least funded things in this country that should be.
And in the state, especially.
You mean a sustainable income?
Exactly.
A sustainable income that could be brought in by hundreds, if not thousands, of individuals in just one state? Well, I mean, thousands of individuals in one state.
Absolutely. Well, per capita, Missouri is at the bottom of the list when it comes to health and senior services.
Yeah, I was going to say.
In the United States.
We're ranked like what?
Of the list per capita. We are the worst.
Oh, we're the worst in the United States.
Per capita.
Wow.
Yes, the worst funded.
Sweet.
That was as of about 18 months ago, so that maybe that's changed. I wouldn't be shocked if it has not. With that being said, rehabilitation is a very important aspect, and we alluded to it earlier, and that is criminals, as you may know them or as I may know them, are often products of their environment, circumstantial criminals, if you will. This happened for that to happen, so on and so forth. Just as any other crime. Yeah, there's a chain reaction. Mm-hmm. And I'm not going to get into the weeds of, all these millions of examples that we could draw right out of our ass right now. But I think everybody can agree, whether you're Republican, Democrat, or somewhere in between, we can all agree that there is not enough rehabilitation going on in the criminal justice system. And we can speak for Missouri specifically because members of this podcast, contributors of this podcast, have worked in the criminal justice system of Missouri or work with the criminal justice system in Missouri. So we're very aware, have a decent pulse on all of that. Rehabilitation must be a factor with drug rehabilitation in particular. And you can make that argument for, anything criminally related, because again, a lot of criminals, product of their environment, and often those things are tied to mental illnesses, perhaps addictions, things of that ilk, products of circumstances. So we're going to pitch to a word from our sponsors.
Traditional condoms just not cutting it in the sack for you? Not getting the overwhelming sensation we all desire? Well, you're in luck.
Herschel Walker here with an expert advice on covering your little teammate when you're looking to make the big play and poke one in the gap. Herschel Walker bareback condom.
Herschel Walker bareback condoms are available now everywhere.
Thank you for the brief pause. We're back with you. So we are going to talk about our next key item on the list. Before I do that, let me just check with everybody and see if anybody wants to add anything else to the rehabilitation discussion that we just had. Any other strong opinions or theories we need to throw out there? Or?
Yeah, I think it's really common sense. You do the thing that you said that you were going to do with prisons in the very beginning, and you rehabilitate individuals. It's a pretty simple concept. I believe, and not to get too far into this, but I know that we had been texting through the chain and you guys have a feeling on the death penalty. I believe that all these empty spots that we could be replacing, that the prison complex fucking doesn't want to lose any rooms. You could fill that tightly with a bunch of these cocksuckers who actually do hurt people.
Yep.
Right.
And fill it up and let them live the rest of their life in absolute fucking misery for the things that they've done.
That's really important that you said that, because I feel like we do so much focus on drug offenses that we do bypass so much, and so much gets overlooked and gets swept under the rug. It's however these departments and what would you say, departments and entities make their money. You know what I mean? So
Yep.
Yeah, so let's hammer down on it real quick. So it's on our list, the death penalty. Let's talk about it. Are we pro? Are we against it? Give reasons why. Josh, I'll let you start.
I am surprisingly pro death penalty to an extent. I think there is a special circumstance for the death penalty. My only issue, man, like we talked about this a bit earlier before the stream, my only issue with it is having the faith in a legitimate justice system. Are we executing innocent people? Because I feel like we've executed tons of innocent people.
There's without question.
Since we brought the death penalty back.
Yeah.
And that's the one thing, I know we've come a long way with forensic sciences and, evidence, but that's such a touchy subject. You know what I mean? Are you 100% sure this person committed a crime before you kill them? But other than that, yeah, in special circumstances, I'm for the death penalty. For me, it would be hard to look to a family and say, I know this man completely murdered your whole family. We're just going to put him in prison and give him an education. And you know what I mean? That's a special circumstance. In each case, it should be a case by case. I don't know how to explain what I'm saying.
No.
On a case by case basis.
Hey, you feel how you feel.
But that's me with the death penalty.
Well, when it comes to the death penalty, again, we talked about a little bit about this, in our own private discussions, but the death penalty definitely is something in my life that I've kind of flip-flopped around on as well. Like, how do you make that decision first and foremost? It's really hard. So you obviously have to choose some criteria that really doesn't move or fluctuate or, isn't too subjective. And I feel like that conversation starts at serial killers. What's your definition of a serial killer first and foremost? So again, that could get a little, shady or whatever, but I feel like people, terrorists, and people who commit terrorist attacks. War criminals.
Yeah.
Yes. People who are responsible for countless deaths in most instances. I think those are the people that should be focused in on if we're keeping the death penalty. And it's hard for me, especially getting back to Josh's example. If I have a family member who's been murdered, it's hard for me not to want to murder that person. Right. So I think it's kind of a reasonable feeling. And anybody who tells you, oh, well, I'm not for the death penalty, it's so inhumane. Well, the minute that they, their daughter, forbid, or son or wife or whatever the case is, that they are murdered in a brutal fashion and that they want justice, we'll see whenever the shoe's on that foot for sure.
Exactly.
So I think it's important for none of us to get too pious and too much on our high horses as well.
Yeah.
We really have to investigate and think about these things as if we were in those roles. Right. So I think that the death penalty has a place for a conversation to be legal federally. I know it's handled essentially state by state and state by state cases. I think the most common by an overwhelming majority is lethal injection.
Right. And see, that's something that I also think should change. I think there should be federal, like you said, federal regulation on the death penalty and not handle and have a standard for the manner of which they execute offenders, because in some states it's not working right. I've read some horror stories, man, of some, you know what I mean? And I'm not cool with that. That is inhumane with the medications that are making people immobile, but still conscious and where they can feel. I'm not cool with that.
Well, we had the example of Gacy. On his execution, it was botched on our show. Yeah. When we did our Killers Cults.
And fuck Gacy, but that's inhumane.
But yeah, his whole proceedings were botched and delayed the whole thing by like 20 plus minutes. And it was due to a flaw in the death penalty system in Illinois specifically. Right. That they had to actually change their procedure entirely, which I'm not even confident that the death penalty is legal in Illinois anymore.
I would doubt it. I would doubt it, yeah. But
Gacy, that was just, in the last 30 years.
Right.
What about you, Knobnard?
Okay, so I never thought in what? So we've known each other since 19 or 20 years old, right? Yeah. So about 16 years for me. 16 years. I never thought that I would be the person to be that pious little cunt. But at the same time, I want to defend the reasoning of why I don't care for the death penalty. The idea that government can decide who dies and who lives, I'm completely against. And also, we're just taking care of a issue that is easily swept away by taking them out, and in their minds they win. I kind of like the idea of throwing them out in a Suicide Squad type situation.
Yeah. Go out with a bang of glory, baby.
I think that they should be their own separate squad of individuals that are forced into situations where, hey, this is it. We're not killing you. we're not doing any of this, but for the betterment of society, this can happen. Of course, that's completely ridiculous, but at the same time,
So let's start a Hunger Games or Most Dangerous Game, where we just
Or we go full Vladimir.
for entertainment.
We go full Vladimir Putin and just, make everybody fight. We don't care. Prisoners, fucking old people.
I think my big thing is the fact that I understand people's want and need to have some resolution and want, well, that guy's dead now because he killed their family members. And I totally get that. I understand. Well, I don't understand, but I can kind of begin to understand the theory behind it. Me, I would just want to know that individual was in solitary confinement for the rest of their life, and they could never do the thing that they want, which is get attention again.
Right.
Because that's all that's what majority of serial killers want.
Sure.
Anyways, is attention. I want to make sure that they have zero attention brought to them ever again. And that we limit press to a certain degree, because even though I'm not about limiting the press, I think these guys get off on this shit.
Yeah.
And girls.
Yeah, for sure.
So I think a life of misery being by themselves, I think that's more humane to me. They're alive and still kicking. And the idea that somebody else could kill one of my kids and be a serial killer. Would I want that person to suffer? Yes. Would I not? Would I want them to be killed? I don't think so.
Well, I want to get back to another point that Josh started to make as well in his talk, was that what about those instances at which people are wrongfully accused of things? So, there's many famous cases, and some of which we could, more accurately pull up in more recent history. The Central Park jogger case, who actually Donald Trump had a lot to say about back in the day.
Yeah, I did.
Even recently. I mean, he's even commented on it in recent years. And the Central Park jogger case, if anybody's unfamiliar with it, essentially the short of it is somebody was jogging in the park, was attacked, and essentially everybody started pointing fingers at these black men, specifically young black men.
Oh, wow. Why?
They were at fault. We could talk about, the West Memphis 3 as well.
There's some awesome documentaries.
And there's a lot of awesome documentaries about that. There's actually really good documentaries about both of these things.
What about the guy from Philadelphia, the Arabic guy? Oh, well, him too. No,
Yeah.
Oh, what was his name? I'll figure it out anyway.
Yeah. Well, while you're figuring that out, I make a joke about Meek Mill, specifically the rapper, but this motherfucker ended up in prison because he was hot dogging it in his car and shit. And the things that he was in jail for and got arrested for and spent any time in prison for was ridiculous. I mean, it was obvious that the police were just essentially picking on him, harassing him repeatedly.
Well, he's an outspoken critic of
law enforcement
and government, state government, stuff like that. So
that should be enough of and I know where we all stand, but the pompousness of what they're willing to do outside of prison is the reason why I have the stance of they should be in prison and not executed. Yeah,
and again, I think it's up for debate in my world. That is
right. That's why I said I have an issue with it still.
But yeah, there's a lot of questions to be answered before we settle on that, and it again gets back to how are we making these decisions? What is the certainty of these decisions?
Yeah,
and certainly option 1A is what we're talking about. Option 1B is what you're talking about, Brandon, and that's a lifetime essentially in solitary confinement of some sort. And the answer isn't the answer for everybody either. You know what I mean?
Right.
It's the same resolution doesn't work for everyone.
Right. It's like standardized testing.
And that goes on both sides of things. It goes on the offended and the offender. And the offender in these cases, maybe that's what they want. They want the publicity like you talked about, Brandon. Maybe they do want a tragic and public death. So I think it's important to be aware of what they're aspiring for and not give that to them as well. But again, who's making these decisions? Hopefully qualified psychological personnel. But again, is that
agreed.
Somebody that's appointed by the state? Is that a non-biased third party? How are we making these decisions? So again, a lot more questions to be asked, but we're just here to kind of talk about the kind of primary things. So I think that's a great point for us to get another word from our sponsors here. And now, a word from everybody's favorite rapping granny, Linda Paulson.
Hello, y'all. I'm hailing from the great state of Utah, My name is Linda Paulson. I've been known as the Rapping Granny, running for presidency. Oh, wait a second, where am I? I think Senate, yeah. So on Fox News, they said I was the rapping Utah Grandma State Senate candidate, and I was asked to respond, and I said, there's going to be haters. Now, I wouldn't be spitting fire, just the holy light of Jesus Christ, asshole. So I gotta say now, I'm getting quite a pull here down in Utah, and it may be a dry county, but I got a pussy to match.
Brought to you by the campaign for Linda Paulson for Senate 2022. Did you happen to, while we were on break, Josh, find the case you're referencing?
Adnan Saeed.
Oh, okay.
You remember him?
Yeah.
Wrongfully convicted of killing his girlfriend out of high school?
Yeah.
His conviction just recently got overturned. What if that dude would have been executed?
So the next item I'm going to talk about, and some of this is going to jump around a little bit. We're trying to keep things a little bit, kind of feng shui here for the sake of the conversation. But 28 days paid maternity leave and paternity leave.
That's
so
ridiculous.
Maternities for the mother, paternities for the father, but there needs to be 28 days with complete protection of all parties involved.
Yep.
You're not going to lose your job. Kind of an FMLA approach. FMLA is 12 weeks, which quite frankly isn't enough for a lot of folks too, depending on what the circumstance and issues are too. How can you tell a new mother that 12 weeks, okay, you got to get right back to work.
Right.
Right. And so this is in excess of, separate from FMLA is what I'm proposing.
Yeah.
So this is 28 days of government funded.
We're probably the only modern nation on the planet that doesn't have a protected.
Right. And I know that a lot of people draw comparisons to the Netherlands and those countries, and they do have a lot of socialist policies, but it's a proven fact that their people are more fond of their government. They are happier people.
Happy?
Yes, in general, they're kinder people.
Weird.
Right.
So I think there's kind of a correlation there that's pretty evident, right?
Right.
Yeah, where you don't have to be completely communist
Right.
to actually have a living society. Like many of you will think that, it's all communism.
God, if I hear that word one more time.
People are happy. It's so strange. It's a country that doesn't go at war all the time.
And, it's, again, absurd. Just because a country does it, that you might have, they got a socialist president or they got socialist beliefs.
Right.
Like, there are so many things that are socialist policies that people don't realize that they take advantage of
911,
daily,
district,
constantly.
I mean, everything.
That if they actually realize the hypocrisy of themselves, might have to do a headstand, But 28 days paid paternity leave, government funded. So in my proposal, it would work very similar to like the COVID relief. And that is your employer fronts the costs for you to have this paid leave. They're reimbursed by the government. They can claim it on their taxes or they can issue a per situation refund.
Right.
That's that. So everybody wins. The government's funding it.
Yep.
Taxpayers' money's funding it. And so this is kind of alludes back to our marijuana legalization and flat tax rates imposed on that. And these things are going to help fund these programs specifically. Anybody had anything else to add to that?
No, just onto the previous point too. I want to make sure to point out to our audience, and I can speak, I think, freely for everybody here. That's the beauty of even having this. I kind of wish we had a straight hardline Republican on talking with us at the same time, but even us friends don't always necessarily agree on the exact same thing, but that's what politics is, right? So that's for you to talk about and you to feel yourself and not be guided by somebody else.
What democracy is
in our conversation
is people finding common ground, like two different ideologies finding common ground.
No, man, it's about two-party system,
right?
Where there's red people and there's blue people, and they fight against each other with a donkey and an elephant, like it's a fucking weird. What's that, Michael Brown? No.
Oh my God! Oh, that's a bad call.
Michael Vick.
It was Michael Vick,
the dog fighter.
I'm bad with names today, folks. I'm bad with names today. Everybody fucks up. Hey, go fuck yourself.
Okay. Michael Brown on the case. So we are going to pivot this onto another talking point of the leave, and that is 14 days paid sick leave throughout the year. So there are individual employer sick leave policies. I think I couldn't give you an exact number, but it is a more sweeping policy reform and HR policies in companies. And let me say this before I get too far into this. Don't expect any company to do the right thing.
Right.
Everything's about the bottom line. Are they in the black? Are we making a profit? And how much of this can go to our CEO's bonus?
Yep.
So, or the other members of the executive committee. So let's keep that in mind.
The
But
board.
14 days paid sick leave. Now that might seem like a little, but it's way more than what we have, which is nothing right now.
Right.
And I think it's a good place to start that conversation. So,
And we don't have any protections. Employers can run rampant with whatever they want to do.
It's left up to the employers right now.
Yeah, and that's...
And now there are many, and let me give some folks in education that might be listening to this today. I can speak from being a middle management person for nearly 15 years, or at least touching or involved in it in a corporation. And I can tell you that there's many ways that the employees do not exercise their rights, and it's really just due to a lack of education and knowledge, quite frankly.
Right.
And everyone needs to realize that you have rights as a citizen, regardless of what your employer might tell you. And if you are sick and you can present excuses for being sick, please, by all means, keep your records, keep copies of it, and you may have a wrongful termination suit on your hand. So, that being said, we all get sick. We get sick year round. And it's important for us to keep in mind that each one of us have an expiration date. You know, we're not going to live forever, and we need to take care of ourselves. And there's a lot of things I know myself. I'll be the first one to raise my hand and guilty of it. I power through a lot of sicknesses, not feeling well, this, that, the other thing, whenever I probably should take just a day off to rest in some instances.
Right.
And I think that kind of becomes a part of machisoism, masculinity, and all those other things, I guess, kind of, as young men were raised up to be.
Oh yeah, especially in this area.
Well, yeah, I want to make that big point there. It's a part of our society as a whole. What we were taught is the right thing to do.
Right.
It's wrong.
Especially mental health breaks. Like people, they don't even consider that something that somebody should be able to do on a sick day. I absolutely 100% believe that people should be able to take a mental health sick day if they need to.
Absolutely. And when it comes to illnesses, I've always taken this approach with my own employees, and that is, it's not that I don't care, but I say this in this way. It doesn't matter to me if it's mental health related, if it's medical health related, if it's dental, if
you
vision,
need time, you need time.
Whatever time that you need.
Right.
Just go get a documented excuse from a medical professional.
Yep.
Whether it's you or somebody that is in the care of you, a son, a daughter, an aunt, a mom, whatever the case is, just get a doctor's excuse.
Just so people aren't taking advantage of it.
Sure. And believe me, give anybody an inch, the right person that is, they'll take a mile. People do exploit systems. I think we all know that. Something that in theory was obviously a very good thing and honestly got us out of a very dark depression as a country is Social Security and the alphabet soup that FDR implemented.
Yep.
All the social programs that he put into place. That helped pull us out of the Great Depression. These are programs that have worked. Social Security was never made to be a be-all that end-all, but there are people in this country that live on Social Security. And that is a huge talking point and issue for a lot of folks, is Social Security specifically, and if you want to hammer down into Social Security disability. I have personally witnessed people in this area and am aware of people fraudulently claiming Social Security disability.
Oh, yeah.
It is a whole racket that is done. I will say, over the years, they have implemented more and more strategies to help weed those offenders out. However, there are people that are professional exploiters of social policies like this. And I think a lot of us here in Southeast Missouri could probably name a good 5 to 10 examples just right off the top of our head.
How much do you want to bet that they yell out those words, "Let's go, Brandon"?
Yeah, and it is odd that there's quite that contingent in this area as well, which seems, again, kind of counterproductive.
Yeah, it's almost like they don't know what a socialist program is.
They don't know the definition of what socialism is, but, that's something we could spend all day on. But, to kind of wrap this back around to what we're talking about, it's getting people the things that they need, the infrastructure that's needed in this country that we are severely lacking compared to other countries. We alluded to it earlier, medical costs. And that's going to bring us into my next discussion topic. And that's going to be medical coverage for all of our citizens, nationalized healthcare.
Yep.
And we as a country are severely behind the 8 ball when it comes to the medical field. My wife works in the medical field. We all know people that work in the medical field. Josh, your mom works in the medical field.
My wife.
Brandon, your sister worked in the medical field. We know your wife works in the medical field, of course.
Yeah.
So I didn't mean to overlook Liz.
No, you're fine.
But we all know people that work in the medical field, and we know the racket that is the medical field. Whether it's the billing side of things, whether it's the provider side of things, the costs that are associated. No other country. We have a well over 200% markup compared to some third world countries in our healthcare costs, which is totally obscene to me and uncalled for.
Yeah, it's absurd.
I think, and if you ask where's that money coming from to supply that, how about we talk to some of these pharmaceutical companies and some of these hospitals that rack up their prices just to be able to put coins in their coffers. So if you want to get some money to be able to help start that fund, how about we start taking people like Scarelli and squeezing them for this unjust and unjustified fucking
Good call out.
havoc that they wreak on regular people.
Yeah, Scarelli. The Wu-Tang copyright film. Yeah.
Well, not only that, look what Moderna's doing. The federal government is going to stop paying for COVID shots. So what did they do? They increased their price of the COVID
200%.
Yeah, 200%. I think.
Yeah. So we are talking about really a multi-front war that's going on too with the medical industry. There's no regulation. Number one. Number two. It's a free market in many respects, even though, yes, there's a monopoly going on there. It's a free market in the sense that there is no regulation. So they will exploit the hell out of people. I mean, just look at cancer medication, for example. Just one treatment of radiation, you're looking at perhaps millions of dollars just for that, just for the medication to conduct a radiation treatment.
Right.
Yeah, my uncle's going through a second treatment right now, and I know that they're not paying directly out of pocket, but that's because they have somewhat of insurance, but they're also going off of existing conditions too. So he's had to battle with the insurance companies over all these terminal illnesses that insurance companies will drop you
right in the middle of coverage
based upon exactly. They'll fuck it. They don't care.
And the insurance companies are another racket in and of themselves. But back to socialized medicine, quite frankly, and that word's going to scare people, but that's in short what it is. Canada has been doing this very successfully for a long amount of time. Now, I will say kind of the famous example and talking point whenever I was in school that I remember hearing just clear as day. I could picture myself back in the desk hearing this.
Yeah.
I know what you're you say. Go to Canada and you see how long it takes you to get to the doctor.
It took me 6 months to get my MRI up there in Canada and Quebec. I tell you what, 6 months.
These people that were asking these questions in high school had no personal experience themselves. So I would like to actually talk to a Canadian in great detail about their healthcare. And
we should get Jason's.
Well, yeah, Jason's.
We could get Jason and
speak to her
his girlfriend.
Well, I have firsthand experience.
Oh, do you? In Canada?
No, not in Canada. In Italy, it is universal healthcare, where I went over there and in their long lines that you're talking about. I went to Pordenone, which is a province of Vicenza, or a city within Vicenza. I sat in the waiting room for maybe an hour and a half before I was seen. I went to Abilene, Texas, whenever my wife thought that she broke her neck, and we waited on her birthday 4 hours. So don't tell me anything about like if you're getting stuck in these lines. This is a myth that you people have all made up yourselves that you use to take us all down.
And we'll get back to your example specifically, Brandon. Italy's so densely populated too, whereas Texas has its sparse populations as well. It's a big
rural
state
areas, right?
And has rural areas and
2 separate hospitals.
And it's obscene that you had to wait that long. But I will say this. I've been to the waiting emergency room here many a times, and I've waited 5.5 hours.
Oh, Parkland is notorious for long waiting times.
So, again, back to the socialized medicine talk, don't fall into these traps, these bullshit talking points, quite frankly. Socialized medicine can be done. And again, taxing things that we're talking about here is going to help fund this. Again, reducing costs when it comes to specifically criminal justice.
One last thing, I'm sorry. My father had his heart medication stolen, along with my mother's medication, stuff that they needed. What they were able to do was get their script from their doctor in the U.S. and just show it to an Italian pharmacist, and they sell it to you. My dad's heart medication with my mom's was like $50. In America, that is $4 to $600 what they would have paid for their medication.
Yeah, that's insanity.
Out of pocket.
It's absurd.
So $50 over the counter. They waited 15 minutes. They got their medication and they went about their way. As people not of that country who live in a separate country were able to come on vacation and get $50 medication that would normally have cost them $400 to $600.
Yeah, and again, there's just so many examples that we could give just when it comes to healthcare in and of itself. But again, some of this reducing costs and things as a government to run so that these funds are available. I got a lot of news for you, folks. You don't know where all your tax dollars are going.
Yeah,
quite frankly.
Actually,
As
there's a large
transparent as it
portion
should
of it
be.
you have no idea where it's going.
And
It's called black money.
a lot of it, I can tell you right now, in particular, is a lot of what we're talking about is controlled by special interests and lobbyists. And that's going to bring me to my next political talking point here.
This may be one of my favorites.
Proposal is that we are going to eliminate all lobbyists.
Yes, sir.
From every level of government.
Take these motherfuckers out one by one.
Legal corruption, baby.
Yep.
Tar and feather every cocksucker that walks through that door.
Yeah.
Lobbyists are of the most evil people in our political maneuverings as a country. Lobbyists control. They are the puppet masters, and your politicians are the puppets.
Yep.
It is without question. So we can talk about some of the more infamous ones. So we've already talked about one, and that's in the medical field, the pharmaceuticals in particular. They are of the biggest lobbyists that there are. We could talk about Wall Street. We can talk about oil. We can talk about big tobacco. We can talk about NRA. There's a lot of dark money that goes into a lot of political decisions that are made. And if you ever hear these comments, earmark bills. It is things that are tacked onto major policy changes by, let's say, just to use an example, let's say a Democrat is proposing that we increase, we'll say $500 billion to small business for COVID relief. Well, to get that deal done, sometimes they have to compromise with a Republican
on certain things
who is advocating on behalf of a lobbyist to deregulate oil fields from an EPA standpoint. So that might be an earmark bill. That's a little tag on that they put on the end. And all they report on the news is like, hey, we got 500 more in small business COVID relief out there. Well, guess what you also did? You also allowed them to dump pollution, oil fields, straight into the environment.
Right.
This is a hypothetical example, mind you.
Right.
But these things go on in your government all the time, and you don't realize it. All you have to do is just do a simple Google search on earmark bills and even infamous and famous cases, and you can see a plethora of them that will enrage you, I am sure. We need to outlaw all lobbyists.
Yep.
And that's going to help in my next talking point, unless anybody's got anything to add to that.
No,
I think we've all decided that most of those people, although I still don't want to kill them, I do want to tar and feather the fuck out of them and then send them straight to jail.
a good film that kind of goes into that would be Thank You for Not Smoking, or Thank You for Smoking with Aaron Eckhart.
Mm-hmm.
If you really want to get into the slime ball game that is tobacco lobbying, that is such a great film.
It's a good comedy.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's going to bring me into my next talking point here and political platform idea, and that is that we need to outlaw all super PACs as well.
Absolutely.
So this is the other dark force entity that's taking place, and we were really starting to make strides with this in the Obama administration, where that there were some limitations on. They say they outlawed super PACs, but there was a way to work around it still yet. But it was much more transparent. So, for example, a lot of what happens, just in layman terms, is that a political action group or committee, a special interest group, will create a pact, and essentially it is a financial fund with a agenda of some sort to influence a ballot, a candidate to advocate for a ballot measure or whatever the case is. But it's to get something done specifically that they want. So, it's not uncommon that, for example, kind of the famous example that we actually used already on the show, if you heard the episode, is where we talked about the Build the Wall super PAC that Trump created.
Oh, yeah.
That all the money magically disappeared from.
Right. Now there's all kinds of legal shit going on.
And there's all kinds of legal shit going on. That's
Steve Bannon.
Correct.
Steve Bannon, the South will rise again. They're taking me. Hey, they're good old sweaty 6 t-shirt wearing fucking Steve Bannon.
Because super PACs are legal right now, We do have to throw to one of our sponsors who is with a super PAC. I have to let you know. And now, a word from everybody's favorite rapping granny, Linda Paulson.
My good friend Ron DeSantis get in trouble for all those uneducated teachers teaching idiots. But you know what I think is that on my first point, actually let's go to my second point as well, and then I'll loop back around like the rip-rapping granny that you all know. Anyways, so the second point is, I would say, the good thing that I used to love back in the day, and I know it's not a popular opinion, Hitler did a lot of things wrong, but one thing that he didn't do wrong is burn those books, because I can't fucking read them. Just set them fire. So I say no to books. Let's just get rid of them, because I can remember my raps. I don't need to write them down.
Brought to you by the campaign for Linda Paulson for Senate 2022. All right, we're back with you. So to elaborate on our super PAC talk, again, I use some examples, some light examples of super PACs, what they are. Obviously, we do not want people with a specific agenda to influence our government officials. So kind of a very popular and common name that you'll hear is the Koch brothers. Just take a look at the Koch brothers. They got their hands in so many industries in this country. A lot of it is a lot of the meat market specifically, but they are modern day robber barons. The Koch brothers have their fingers and rooted in so many super PACs that are influencing your elections. So super PACs to me are of the most evil things that there are in this country.
Right. I mean, basically a quick summary of it is all these billionaires getting together and dumping up billions of dollars into something to make it happen.
Right. And speaking of dumping billions of dollars into something to make it happen, we can relate this to Missouri specifically and the election that's coming up on Tuesday. And that's Eric Schmidt. He has outraised Trudy Bush Valentine specifically, who is an heiress to the Bush throne. And he has outraised her, and she's had to actually pour her own personal money into her campaign to even try and catch up, and he's still outraising her.
Right.
Why do you think Eric Schmidt is able to outraise?
Because he's a pawn for whoever he's working for.
Exactly right. It's dark money that is funding Eric Schmidt specifically.
Right.
And so that's really an at-home example that we can use with these super PACs.
It's got to stop.
And again, I didn't elaborate on this, but kind of the transparency too. So now, whenever you see ads on TV, used to for a brief time, I'd say about at least a 3 to 4 year window or so, they had to reveal who funded the political ad, which you still do to an extent. But if it was a super PAC, you had to itemize the people's names. Yeah. As far as what the cap was. Now they're back to that just ambiguous naming. Like they'll name things like the people for a strong America.
Right. Yeah.
Funded this ad. Things of that ilk. So that's like, it's a wordplay thing. It always tries to, it's nationalism 101. It is propaganda 101. And that is to make something sound like, oh, well, God, I'm for a stronger America. I gotta support what these people are talking about. Right?
Hell yeah. I got to support Marco Rubio's sex fund where he messes around with little boys.
Allegedly, right?
I got to support that, man.
Oh, Marco.
Hey, Marco Rubio, we got our eyes on you, man. There's some stuff coming about you out here.
Absolutely.
Got to get canceled, boy.
Thought you hated the gays.
Used to work the streets back in South Florida, baby.
About to be in my fucking South Florida.
Speaking of South Florida, one of our sponsors today is from South Florida, and I'm going to pitch to them right now. Have you ever considered what would happen if there were a breach in your confidential documents? Who would be responsible? Who's at fault? You? Your refuse company? Your clientele? What would be the consequences? What would be the financial impact for those involved? Don't sweat it. Let Shredder of South Florida remove all worry and doubt. Give your confidential materials to Shredder of South Florida. Our new state-of-the-art facility is located on the beautiful outskirts of Mar-a-Lago, and some might argue it's more secure than Fort Knox. Highly classified government material, international espionage, nuclear codes, P-tapes, no worries. We'll shred and dispose, wink, wink, your documents for you. Now, with 24-hour drop-off, one of our qualified team members will be happy to assist you with your every need. When you arrive to our property, our team members can be easily identified by their tracksuits and bleak disposition. Don't be alarmed by the thick Chechen accents. We'll Russian necktie all your troubles away. Call 855-668-8777. That's 855-668-8777 now. 855, not USSR. Let Shredder of South Florida remove all worry and doubt. We're going to go on to our next discussion topic, and we are going to talk about one of my favorite discussion topics as part of our political platform that is sure to piss everybody off that's going to listen to this.
Yeah.
And that is separation of church and state.
Fucking amen.
It is something
separation of church and everything.
Actually, this might be my number one.
We have danced around this. It's been a cat and mouse game for at least the last 30 or 40 years specifically, certainly in my lifetime plus. And that is, we started to move as a nation away from, we'll just call it archaic Christian fundamentals that have enslaved this country and policy in many respects. You know, we literally as a nation, our founding as a nation was to flee a king and force religion. I mean, if you go back to the early colonists, even now we're talking
we're not talking King George, we're talking 1600s.
Yeah, we're talking, like Jamestown, that type of shit. Puritans, they left Europe with intent for religious freedom. Mm-hmm. That is why all of us whiteys are here right now, quite frankly.
Amen.
That started a fad, and progressively that turned into other issues, like the no taxation without representation and so on and so forth that we like to wear our don't tread on me shirts and fly our flags for. But nonetheless, separation of church and state. You can be religious, and you're more than entitled to be religious, and I have no problem with anybody being religious.
Right, I will fight for you to have your religious liberty, 100%.
However,
100%.
This country has danced this dance too many times, and that is where we feel it, our need, our necessary, we feel it is our right sometimes, especially in the neocons of America, your Marjorie Taylor Greens and your Lauren Boeberts of the world, that we should impose our religion on you. And that things like the Pledge of Allegiance saying under God should be mandated for everyone to say. And we're going to ostracize people for not. And we're going to enforce Christian-led prayer in school. And listen, folks, there's other religions out there than Christianity, especially in this country. This is a country of religious freedom.
Right. You can't write legislation to conform to one ideology.
Exactly. And the minute that you do, you also need to realize, now I know that a lot of people take the position, okay, well, as long as it's Christian, it's okay. And that okay. But I'm about to tell you how fucking stupid that you are.
Yeah.
That is, there is no religion, with the exception of perhaps the Muslim religion, that is more divisive and tribalized than Christianity.
Right.
Christians hate Christians. Christians kill Christians. Christians, based on your denomination, will not like you because you're not the same denomination of one another. And a lot of it has to do with religious piety. And it's, I believe the right thing and you don't, so you're going to go to hell. And that automatically creates a seed of division between folks.
Yeah.
There are your non-denominational Christians who try to be a little bit more peace, love, and understanding, if you will, and that no denomination, we're all one, and they're the ones that have the coexist signs and that sort of stuff, which is all great in theory. But I'm going to tell you, the majority of Christianity is not like that. I've seen it firsthand. I've experienced many Christian
I think we can all three speak to that from where we're from.
And I've had some very revealing conversations with heads of state in political/religious organizations that you'd be surprised how preachers and ministers talk about other people, other faiths behind closed doors as well.
My grandfather, he was a preacher. And he said some stuff that I was like, wow, man, that's pretty Christian,
Right. But of course, the separation of church and state, the freedom of religion as well, these are conversation topics that go hand in hand. The freedom from religion also is the freedom of religion. It works both ways.
Right.
If I don't want your religious beliefs enforced on me or my children, that is my right.
Yeah. As
an American citizen. So there should be no public schools that receive any sort of funding that are imposing any type of religious agenda. And I would make that argument if it was they were teaching, the Muslim faith in school or Judaism or anything like that.
Right.
I don't want religion to be talked about in school unless it's an elective that somebody's voluntarily taken, and it has to be approached the criteria of that conversation. That agenda needs to be a historical reference. Like this year, so and so founded LDS, or whatever the case is.
Like a historical.
Yeah, more
fact.
of a historical, and they moved from Indiana to Missouri and moved from Missouri to Nevada. So like more of a historical reference versus now this is the God they believe, this is why they're right, or this is why they're wrong. Those sorts of things are for the Bible study that you have at church.
Right.
That's not for school.
Right.
But I have had those experiences at school where religion has been talked about, but it's not in a pro any religion sense. It's more of a historical, which if done correctly is a good course to take.
Yeah.
Because people need to realize the history of their religion as well. See, that's what they don't teach you in your church. When was the church founded? When was this political organization founded? What year? Where did this branch off of? For example, again, we can get into kind of that conversation. We've talked about it a few times on the show, but when it comes to religion in particular, these three things are married very close to one another, and a lot of people don't realize it. That's Christianity with the Old Testament, the Torah of Judeo faith, as well as Muslim religion. A lot of people don't know that those essentially just at a certain point, they start to break off from one another. But when they talk about God, it's all the same God.
Yep. Allah and Yahweh are the same person.
Yes.
It
is just a language translation difference,
right,
if you will. But anywho, separation of church and state. Anybody have anything else to add to that?
Can we tar and feather them too?
Well, we should.
Or are we not doing that?
I think kind of the only other explicit thing we didn't say about it, obviously, there should be no political maneuverings that are funded by religious organizations as well. Religion needs to be totally
like that's the whole thing,
and that's certainly a problem.
You shouldn't be claiming a religion to get a whole base to follow you.
Right. Absolutely. I think that politicians' religious faith should not be brought into question and should not be discussed. At least, I mean, if they choose to discuss it, that's a different conversation. That's freedom of speech, but it should not be inquired about. In fact, it should not have to be revealed. It should not be an expectation to reveal. I think that's another thing that's a huge problem, especially, I found it pretty comical back during McCain and Obama's campaigning against one another.
Yeah.
And not initiated by McCain. I will say McCain took the high horse and showed some class at times, but it was a lot of his followers and his base that were questioning, well, he's a Muslim just because of his name.
I remember
right?
he's him
or because of his father, and a lot of people question his faith.
And the rest of us are going, our group of friends are like, so.
Yeah.
Right.
What
Even
does
if it's
that
true,
matter?
what does it matter? Right?
Traditional condoms just not providing the intimacy you want with your partner? Look no further than this Georgia Senate candidate and entrepreneur for answers.
When you're looking to dominate the line, the petty line that is, Herschel Walker, bareback condom.
Check your local pharmacy for Herschel Walker Bareback condoms, available now.
That's conversation about freedom of religion and freedom from religion pivots us very naturally into my next discussion topic, and that is we are going to tax all religious organizations.
It's a business. If anybody's bringing in that kind of money, man, absolutely. If they're paying people, they should be paying taxes.
You have private jets. You have private jets.
These mega churches.
Why do you have private jets?
It's fucking ridiculous, man.
I mean, we could go on with the names of all of these famous televangelists, your TD Jakes, your 700 Club.
Or look like these places in here, even close, like in St. Louis, like Faith STL or whatever, that giant super church that's up there right outside of Fenton. Tell me they shouldn't be paying taxes when you go and drive past that church.
Right.
That place looks like the freaking dome. You know what I mean?
For sure. It is a racket. Religious institutions, I can tell you again, and I think we've all seen it if you've worked in retail of any sort, they're exempt from sales tax usually.
Yep.
Now here's a funny little thing about collecting taxes too. Unless you have, anybody can tell you that they're anything. So if you don't have proper documentation, you don't have to let anybody be tax exempt. So for example, if you have a Missouri issued sales tax exempt letter, it precludes you from any taxes collected from the state of Missouri.
Right.
Specifically.
Right.
It doesn't preclude you from, like in Farmington, they collect a tourism tax.
Yeah.
For example. The churches get really bent out of shape whenever they hear that they have to pay any sort of tax.
Right. It's like, I'm in the church. I don't pay no tax.
Look at the Tammy Faye story. that they just did in the movie representation of it. Obviously, it's a movie, so not all of it's factual, but there comes to a point where now you're these people's messiah. I guess the Righteous Gemstones clears it up pretty well.
Oh, yeah.
So if you guys want a factual documentary style version of what happens in America, watch the Righteous Gemstones. They actually put people in cages, and there are strongman teams where you have to bear the cross or you are kicked out.
Enjoy your bloomin' onion. Good day.
Good day.
Religion, unfortunately, is a thing in this country that has created the biggest roadblocks in progress. And again, it's a vocal minority that often is, and it's essentially kind of pivots into a witch hunt where people are afraid to speak their opinions even in these cases. And I feel as though that obviously the playing field needs to be leveled for all faiths. And obviously we are a Christian dominant country, and it is hard to campaign whenever you are not a practicing Christian of some faith, because you are often, or at least perception is, that you are precluding a segment of your constituents, and which is really sad, that because religion should have nothing to do with politics, and politics should have nothing to do with religion. Politics is a job at the end of the day, and you don't need your religion to conduct your job. And morality is not tied to a religion.
And due to that, 40 years later, we are yet in another satanic panic where what's his nuts, that wrinkly prune who just will not die for some fucking
Mitch
reason,
McConnell?
on the 600,000th whatever club, was stating that anybody who promotes Halloween is satanic. It's a pagan holiday and it's satanic. You, sir, are a cunt.
Yeah, Pat Robertson. Yeah, obviously he's a fucking clown and has been embarrassed more than once for his false prophecies. He is a false prophet. And if you follow the Christian faith, read your Bible about false prophets and what should be done with them.
Yeah, see what the Bible tells you.
And it's a lot nicer. It's not, or tarred and feathered is a lot nicer.
You're supposed to stone them to death.
Yep.
So if you're a real practicing Christian, I'm just saying, draw your conclusions.
Go to Home Depot, grab those decorative stones, and just start lobbing those motherfuckers.
So we've got a lot more
in a fictitious world.
We've got a lot more things to address here on our political platform. So before we do so, of course, I have to throw to one of our sponsors again.
Donald Trump, he's a good man. He just needs a new hairpiece. Peace out.
Paid by the supporters of Linda Paulson for Senate 2022.
Name brand condoms not cutting your mustard when it's game time.
When you have to pound it out on the ground, Herschel Walker Bareback Condom is the answer.
Herschel Walker Bareback Condoms, an official sponsor of Herschel Walker for Senate.
All right, we're back with you. We're going to really churn out some more of our policies here and try not to sidebar too hard. I think some of these will be pretty reasonable and we can get to, straight points about these. But obviously, religion impacts this one a lot, and I think it pivots us into our next discussion topic nicely, and that's gay marriage and rights for trans rights as well.
Oh, yeah.
Need to be protected at the federal level. There was so much that had been done, again, during the Obama administration specifically, and allegedly Biden's the one who talked Obama into doing anything, which seems odd to me. But nonetheless, apparently his faith blocked his judgment until his last term. I think Obama was afraid of the backlash that he would see personally. Yeah. And when he was on his last term, there wasn't anything that he could get anything about. But that's neither here nor there. There is a lot of, things like don't ask, don't tell was being threatened and attacked by the Trump administration.
Don't say gay.
Don't say
gay in Florida. Yeah.
In Florida. Another huge, big thing that's happened here recently. I don't understand the attack on gay people. First off, who the fuck cares?
Right.
What happens in the bedroom between two consenting adults is none of your goddamn business.
100%.
And I am tired. This is such old news at this point to me. We, as a civilized nation, need to get past. There's been homosexuals, there's been trans people in our world since the existence of man.
Yeah, it's happened forever.
What? They've been subverting our political process by coming up with new, and all I do is use micro machines in my bedroom, and you guys are Men, women, men, women.
It's Adam and Eve, not Adam and Steve.
Yeah.
God damn it!
Jeez.
Now, how many times have I heard that?
I've heard that a lot.
Yeah, fuck all you people. And most of these people, I really do believe, is because they didn't fit what the American dream that their daddy told them was, and rightfully so. They're getting porked from behind, and they can because it's in the privacy of their own bedroom. But maybe you should come out and just say, "Hey, gay's okay."
And another thing with that is limiting people of the LGBTQT, whatever I can't think of all of it. I never get it right.
LGBTQT plus.
There you go.
Mm-hmm.
Them being limited on adopting children too. I think that's absolutely absurd.
Right.
If they're, like if they make a good income and they meet the requirements to adopt a child, why not? Like, I don't get it. You know what I mean? Like,
Well, cause Josh, they're gonna subvert our fucking democracy, man.
The person that thinks that gay is a choice is a ignorant individual.
mhm.
And I think that they need to do the old wife swap treatment for about 90 days and live with a gay person against their will.
Yeah.
Quite frankly. That's going to get...
I'd love to watch that
Oh
show.
my God. I'd pay to watch that. I'd subscribe every month.
Yeah,
They'd probably have the time of their lives.
probably.
So many preconceived notions, prejudices can just be demolished by giving somebody a chance and listening to them and their story and their life. And there are people out there that, yes, I believe, didn't know that they necessarily were attracted to a man and they are a man, or a woman and they are a woman, or whatever the case is, until they experienced it for the first time.
Right.
As well.
Right.
So in those instances, you perhaps can make an argument that those people at that point were able to make that decision. However, the heart wants what the heart wants.
Right.
And, I don't think it's really up for conversation. I just find it so weird that usually in this talk, people feel the need to say, well, you ain't born gay. It's a choice. Like, even if it was, what does it matter?
Right.
It's none of your fucking business.
Right.
Number one.
How is it going to affect you?
And exactly.
Right. Because the heart wants what it wants. I want to be a Disney princess in the bedroom, and I want squirrels to frolic upon my body while I make sweet, sweet love to my wife.
Nothing
How's
wrong
that
with
working
that.
out
That's your
for you?
business.
That's all I want to do is I want to be naked with squirrels and deer and not touch those animals sexually.
Are
I
you
want to
sure?
make sure that that's very clear. They're just props that are there to, they're in the background. And then,
From the Disney store.
sometimes I may want to pleasure myself with, you heard it, cake. Yet
Yes,
again,
cake.
pleasure yourself, not the animals surrounding you and your Disney princess fantasy.
Cake, a legacy sponsor of the ATI podcast at this point. So, Cake, hit us up. Looking for that official sponsorship.
Yeah.
Yeah, they literally told me that they would get back to me and have not gotten back to me. So I'm pretty sure we're doing an illegal thing right now. I'm joking.
Well, free advertisement. I don't think they're going to complain.
Yeah.
Yeah, fuck it.
Gay marriage, gay rights, trans marriage, all protected at the federal level. And as we all know, that there's a threat with our current Supreme Court, quite frankly, at these things. They've alluded to it. Clarence Thomas, the fuck all that
Wanted
is,
to kill it before he leaves his position.
he without question has made it clear that it is on his agenda for conversation. So these folks need to be given the same rights as the rest of us.
Hey players, are you in the game to finish strong?
When the clock isn't the only thing she's milking. Herschel Walker, bareback condom.
Herschel Walker, bareback condoms, all the route to go.
Speaking of not telling people what to do in the bedroom is going to lead me into my next discussion point, and that's going to be federally legalizing prostitution. At the federal level, this should be legalized. It's legalized in many states and or cities, municipalities specifically, or counties. Obviously, Nevada itself is notorious. Las Vegas area.
Take the criminal element
The
out of
bunny
it
ranch.
and make it more healthy, and I'm with you.
And stop treating people like shit who put their own bodies on the line for your entertainment. Because we see you, Lindsey Graham. You're diddling that butthole. You're sitting there with your pinky, with a little bit of cake on it. Oh, man, that tastes like a buttered biscuit.
Now, he actually
Put a little
uses
ham on it.
He actually uses, the pastry, the cake, the baked good. He doesn't use the lube.
Yeah. He doesn't use our product.
He likes to raw dog it.
Raw dog.
He loves a little hurt.
I want a little butter on my biscuit, and by butter I mean a little poop on my scoop.
So we are going to legalize prostitution nationwide. How do you do this? Now, all the religious fanatics are appalled right now. What happens in the bedroom stays in the bedroom. It's none of your damn business if it's two consenting adults. At the end of the day, quite frankly, folks, sex is a transaction for a lot of people out there.
Yeah.
There are some people out there who do not want a romantic connection. It is serving a purpose. It's a release. And if two adults are consenting and they both understand what's going down, bless them.
Yep.
Quite frankly. Let them do their business.
And I'd even put, God bless them.
I would be so bold. How do you do this safely? Of course, there needs to be a national registry for STD and STI testing specifically.
Yeah.
And this is something that already is done in places like Californians where they go in for testing once a week and that sort of thing. Now, of course, anything can happen from partner to partner. However, you can stop a lot of things with early detection as well. So again, I feel like that this should be a no-brainer. Sex work is work too, and it's dehumanized by many people and looked down upon and frowned upon. But a lot of those people in that industry, that they enjoy doing that as well. And who's to say to stop them?
Yeah.
Right.
Anybody got anything else to add to that?
Maybe just protections as well, so that those companies, because we all know companies are so great.
Oh, they're going to get their fingers into that. For
Oh,
sure.
yeah.
Literally.
All I would say is that protections, not for companies, but for people against their own company, so that they are not exploited in any way, shape, or form.
So I'm going to lead that into our next, I think, very imperative discussion topic, which we've essentially dedicated a whole episode to this already as a podcast, and that's to legalize safe abortions for all parties necessary.
Yeah,
Trans people, women.
We've detailed this one, but yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
This is law of the land. It's been law of the land for years. The fact that they even touched it is a disgrace to the people that were on the court before them. So
Dr. Oz actually just said in a debate with Fetterman that Fetterman's radical beliefs on abortion. Let me remind you fuckheads out there how long this has been a law. 50 years. A precedent. Knowing law, at least a little bit, a precedent is what everybody goes off of to cite in their case against that subject. And many people, it used to be a green thing that every single abortion case would cite this in some way, shape, or form. Now it's being put into question. What should be put into question about something that's been decided that isn't harmful to anybody that is living? And the very fact that we're on this topic right now, I completely forgot about this subject matter for this podcast because it shouldn't be a fucking thing.
Right.
Yep.
Absolutely. I agree.
Yep.
And it's sad that we have to have this conversation, but we certainly obviously are huge proponents for women's health. We have many women in our lives, and even if I didn't, I would still have the stance. So,
I wish they'd just take over the fucking world already. Shit would be so much better.
Probably.
Come on, ladies.
I know that if I leave my life in charge of everything, and it makes things so much easier.
Amen.
So we're going to move on to our next discussion topic, and we really could have tied this in with our incarceration talk earlier, but we need to restore voting rights for all citizens, including those incarcerated. Now, I don't think that this is perhaps the most important point of our agenda. However, the right to vote is a human right. It really is. Now, people will argue against that and say, in communist China, not everybody can vote, which I find it funny because they use that discussion topic both ways. Quite frankly, the hypocrites that they are.
Exactly. They can't vote, and you don't like communism.
Right, exactly.
If a government is having any say in your life, you should be able to vote and have a say on who's in that government.
Inevitably, the social contract between government and its citizens are that you are, in theory, not even theory, literally, giving up some of your rights to be lorded over. You are agreeing in a social contract. There are laws that you have to abide to. Now, did you ever agree to those laws as a person? No, most of us were born into them. There's city ordinances. I mean,
100%.
This is at so many levels. There's a local level, so your city ordinances or your townships, your county, your state, your federal. There's so many layers to this. There's international law as well that people don't realize. You are not as free as you think you are, regardless of what you may believe, And so I think it's important to if we are to be the country that is the example a la democracy, which we like to tout ourselves as always, we need to allow those that are incarcerated to vote still yet. They're still humans. They still have rights. And maybe there's a candidate out there that is for more humane rehabilitation, So again, this leads us back into our opening conversations. I think it is important that they are the ones incarcerated, that they are the ones who can tell you how they're being treated. We can't tell you how they're being treated. Honestly, at the end of the day, we can't tell you exactly how they're being treated.
Right.
So I think it's important.
And to be fair on what Barrett was saying before, and I think I can finish this sentence, we're not as free as what they're telling you we are. So these people that keep on telling you that they want to stand up for your rights don't
give a shit.
Give a fuck about you. Only you do, and that's why you should vote.
Absolutely.
That's the point.
Yeah, I actually had a discussion with my kids about that the other day. I'm like, don't ever give up your right to vote because it's like one of the last rights that you have. So if you give that up, you didn't got much left.
Absolutely. So getting into rights once again, I think that a lot of this, of course, is dictated by people who have become, quite frankly, career politicians. And I know that this is a bipartisan, at least talking point. Now, as far as practice, it's not been executed.
Right.
But I will tell you right now that I've heard many Republicans say this. I've heard it said in Republican political campaigns and platforms that we need to drain the swamp. Remember that famous saying?
Yeah.
How do we drain the swamp? We impose term limits.
Yes.
The president has term limits. They have 2 4-year terms. I'm not looking to mess with that. It is what it is. I think it's pretty strong. I think it's hard for any president to accomplish anything 4 years plus in. And so often, yes, that's why citizens of America do vote for a second term of a president, regardless of how successful their first term was, because they do realize it does take time to get things done. But that's because our current political structure as well. So I think some of what I'm about to propose is going to help with that. The number one thing that I have an issue with in our country from a political standing standpoint is the limits or lack thereof on our Supreme Court, federally appointed judges that get these life terms. Nobody should be in politics for their life. We all lose a grip on reality. We all lose a connection with the present day at some point in our lives. That's just, again, human nature. Some of us are sharper than others. Some of us, aren't so much. Some of us hold on to that longer than others. I think and I'm not really proposing ageism here, but I think it's important to keep in mind that, again, career politicians over time, they too find out how to manipulate the system. This isn't just an attack on those people in those social programs we talked about earlier. People in politics, career politicians, they know how to manipulate the system as well.
Power's toxic.
Absolutely.
If having power for too long, you start to lose your grip on reality.
100%.
And a lot of these people, like you said, have been here for, ever since we've been born.
So my proposal, I think this is a great idea. Judicial appointments get a 6-year term. They're still appointed by the president. They get to serve their 6 years after their vetting process, of course, that naturally they all go through. But the second 6-year term, they have to go through the same vetting system once again by the legislator to be approved for that second term. So if you're not an effective court justice, bye. See you later, Felicia.
Yep. You go.
If you were showing political bias as a judge, see you later.
Absolutely.
We don't want you.
So that'll help remove some of the politics out of the judicial system, I feel like. Moving on down to the list, the legislative. This is largely okay as it is, quite frankly. However, term limits. So any legislator, whether it's people in the Senate or the House, 2 terms, that's it. And 4 years are your term.
Right.
So again,
and this
argument, more than 8 years.
This argument can be made from both sides of the aisle because you talk about people like Mitch McConnell who's been in office forever. Look at Bernie Sanders. How long has he been in the Senate? You know what I mean? So the argument can be made for both sides.
There's nothing saying that you can't be an activist for the rest of your life either.
Yeah, and there's nothing saying also that you can. Again, in this legislature, there's 2 bodies here.
Right.
So you can be in the House
and the Senate, right,
for 2 terms, and you can be in the Senate for 2 terms.
That's a good idea. So so they're two
it's already
the
a thing.
branch, right?
Yeah, it's already a thing. People switch. So you're talking about maximum 16 years of service in the legislature. And if you want to hold other political offices, by God, president can name you to their cabinet. You can run as a justice. You can run for president.
A local legislator.
Exactly.
I like it.
So I think term limits are a must in this country to clean up the political corruption that we all see on both sides of the aisle every day.
Right.
So I think that that's a very big bipartisan talking point that doesn't get, quite frankly, campaigned on enough. There's loose talk about it, but no action.
I think some people may say, well, why would a senator want to go to their local legislative body? And I would say, because you're a civil servant. The point is to help the people.
Your constituents.
Right. Exactly right. The reason that these people stay in these positions too, we have to circle it back to the special interest talk and the lobbyists and the super PACs. You look at a senator's salary, you look at a president's salary, people in the executive branch, judicial branch, and you think, it's more than I make, but it's, you're not getting rich at that job. They are getting rich at that job. They're collecting money.
Oh, they are.
They're getting their kickbacks, if you will, that you don't realize. That's why these people stay in these positions at, hundreds of thousands of dollars salaries that would normally be considered upper middle class in this country from a financial bracket situation. But yeah, so let's move on to our other discussion topics unless anybody else has got something to add to that.
Nope. Rock solid.
Hey, little man, you're gay as shit. Come over to Granny's pussy. I'll show you more shit. Gay boy standing over there looking fine. Looks so good, I wanna stick my hands in mine. Gosh darn it. Forget your books, forget everything. Cause grandma's coming for all your things. Gosh darn it. In your soul, in Jesus. Oh my God, I feel I'm my own Aerosmith. Gosh darn it. Dry county, dry armpits, dry arm with asshole in my tits. Gosh darn it. Who you think you are, mister? Standing there for rights of the people. Fuck you. Gosh darn it. Inside my snookie. Gosh darn it. 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 Darn it.
Tax the rich, tax the corporations. They must pay their fair share.
Right.
So this is another part of our funding. There are wealthy people in this country that do not pay taxes. Now, does that sound wild to you? I'm not talking payroll taxes because it was never their money to begin with. They just collect that for Uncle Sam and hand it off.
Right.
We're talking corporate tax.
Yeah.
That companies like Amazon, Elon Musk's enterprises, we can keep going on down the list. Donald Trump and some of his enterprises has not paid or paid very little taxes based on the tax code, how it's written to benefit corporations.
Loopholes and write-offs.
Why is it that I, as a extremely low middle class citizen, pay 2, 3, 4 times, hundreds of times more taxes than a corporation does, or a wealthy person does? Inexcusable. You think about the money that's collected from, let's say, 2% on a billionaire in taxes versus
let's look at a $35,000 to $50,000 income a year. A 2% of that versus 2% of $50 billion. You know what I'm saying?
You're talking me as a citizen, and again, you can break this down into state talk, federal talk. But me as a citizen, personal property tax plus federal income tax, I'm up in the 20 plus percentile, 30%, close to what I pay in taxes. Well, and again, if I was to break it down, which I don't do, itemize my personal expenses. So every time you go to Walmart for groceries, all that stuff, that's not even including that tax that's collected on us on a day-to-day basis that beats us down,
Right.
which is pretty commonly close to 10%.
Right.
At the end of the day, the corporations need to pay their fair share. The rich need to pay their fair share. And this is how we fund things.
Right.
If we just tax the rich, what they needed to be taxed, we can fund everything that I've talked about and more already. Just that component alone. But we've also talked about collecting tax on recreational goods as well here today.
I mean, a simple market transaction tax on Wall Street alone could fund 2 or 3 of these programs that we've talked about.
Without question.
Yeah, agreed.
Again, back to the tax talk. We're going to tax the rich. We're going to tax the churches. We're going to legalize it and tax it. I think our government's out of that recession. There's no more inflation and all that fun stuff already. So I think we're already on the positive trend. So some other programs we're going to fund with this: free 4-year college education or trade school verification or vocational school for all citizens. And it is a lifetime guarantee and a lifetime education free for all veterans.
Absolutely.
So regardless if a veteran has a bachelor's degree and they want to go back to school for a master's or doctorate, or they just want to do an entirely different, if you want to be a career student, go for it.
Absolutely. 100.
Yeah, and your GI Bill is extended not just to a dollar amount, but actually, like what Barrett said, where it's you spend your military service, after a certain amount of years, you are given that exactly how you would be in the military now.
I will bring up a very controversial point in our discussion today right now, and that is that the major segregation that goes on in this country is classism now.
Yeah.
Now, classism is tied a lot to race. It is.
It is.
Can you think of a group of people that is more commonly looked upon, down at, more publicly accepted than the poor? More publicly accepted than the poor. The poor are looked down at routinely by all races in this country.
Right. Yeah.
And are marginalized. So classism in this country is a huge issue, and we've got to take some steps to kind of bridge those gaps. So taxing those people and their fair share is kind of what we talked about, but that's also going to lead me into couple other ideas from the financial standpoint. And that is, first and foremost, universal income subsidy from the annual tax surplus, which we're going to have a tax surplus already in theory based on the principles that we've talked about. So what is universal income subsidy? If you listen to any of Andrew Yang's campaigning that he did for the 2016 election, 2016? 2020. I think he did for both anyways. Irrelevant.
The $1,000?
Yeah. He came up with this concept, and it was to help offset for automation, essentially, which is the biggest talking point in this, quite frankly. And that is $1,000 a month of universal income to all American citizens to help offset job loss for things such as automation, particularly like, industries like trucking's getting hit really bad, manufacturing, so on and so forth. This $1,000 a month, quite frankly, that's my house payment in a month, guys.
Right.
So I'm not going to get rich from this, but I'm certainly not going to be, suffocating for money from paycheck to paycheck like I do right now.
Yeah, exactly.
I think $1,000 a month would help a lot of people with just their basic living expenses. And that's the idea, is it allows you to pay your bills. And it's not even all of them. It's not all mine, but it's a considerable portion. And I think that is a very humane way going forward, and that's taking care of our citizens. We often don't equate financial health to medical health, but there is a correlation there.
Yeah,
the more money that you have, the more ability that you have to have access to healthcare, to have access to quality healthcare.
I was going to say, quality of healthcare.
I don't know many billionaires that don't have top shelf healthcare.
Right.
But I know a lot of poor people who have bottom shelf healthcare.
Or no healthcare, or and pay on, don't make a certain bracket so they don't.
Exactly.
Or fear to even go and get their health taken care of out of the expensive health. You know what I mean? I
don't believe we've ever touched on this in the show. So when all the family COVID relief money was going out, so this is the amounts, the $500 per person or $1,000 per couple or whatever the amounts were now here in the last few years that we all received during mainly the Trump administration, but then carried over into the Biden administration. I believe it was 3 different payments, if memory serves me correctly.
Yeah, I believe so.
Depending if you had dependents on your taxes, so on and so forth, affected the amount that you received. I have a prominent conservative in my life who's paying for this? We're going to pay for this at the end of the day. Blah, 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 blah. I said, okay, when that check comes, when that money hits your account, I need you to turn around and write a check back to Uncle Sam and give the money right back.
Right.
Well, I ain't doing that.
Well, why would you not do that?
Right.
I had no explanation when I asked this person this, but that money right there helps so many people. There are people that got laid off. Unemployment, was astronomical, hit record marks in many aspects and areas of the country. Moving on to that, still staying in the financial wheelhouse, we're going to impose a $15 federal minimum wage.
That should have happened 5 years ago.
So a lot of people don't realize that we're still in the $7 range on federal minimum wage, which is absurd. And a lot of employers still can get away with, if they don't have enough employees under their helm, paying the federal minimum wage, which is actually lower than and a half in many cases compared to other states in particular. I will say Missouri has started to trend in the right direction. Here at the first of the year, we're going to be moving to $12 an hour at minimum wage, which is good and is a step in the right direction. However, it's still not $15 an hour.
Right.
You have to look at cross price comparison analysis, and we really need to look at ratio on the cost of goods, how that changes from year to year, inflation, that sort of stuff to keep in mind if there needs to be adjustments for minimum wage going forward, because there's been so little done with federal minimum wage in such a long time. That's why you're seeing this quote unquote drastic jump, which some conservatives might argue against me. I think a $15 minimum wage is more than reasonable. And even now you see a lot of employers, particularly in this area, start at least $13.50 an hour. So for flipping burgers part-time.
Yeah.
So I think it's a very reasonable expectation and where to start the conversation.
Hot date in the pressure zone? What's the call at the goal line?
Just run it up the gut like me, Herschel Walker.
Herschel Walker bareback condoms?
Next financial thing I have to mention too is all my exempt or salaried employees out there. Obama, toward the end of his administration, actually signed executive legislation imposing overtime for exempt employees. Now, I can speak very specifically on this because I am a salaried employee, has been for some amount of time. And that is if you are at a certain threshold. Obama, during his administration, let's say if you were, I believe the mark was under $46,000 a year, that you had to be paid overtime if you were a salaried employee. Now, this is something that he was implementing in 2016. So now we're 8 years down the line, or 6+ years down the line. And so that needs to be evaluated even more so. I would venture to tell you that minimum threshold needs to be raised now. But the idea there is essentially if your employer is making you work past 40 hours a week, you need to keep track of your time. And in any time that you go past that 40 hours a week, even as a salaried employee, you are welcome to overtime. So you would break down your salary into an hourly rate and be paid time and a half. And I think that's only fair because, again, back to our evil corporations in this country, there's a lot of salary people out there who are made to work essentially for free and compromise their family lives and their well-being.
Oh, yeah.
Just to make their employer happy.
I worked years in Walmart.
And get no financial benefit from doing so.
I've worked years in Walmart and their salary management. I had a store manager that would get there at 5 o'clock in the morning, dude. And when I got there, and then I would go home at the end of my shift, go home for a couple hours, come back, go shopping with my wife at 5 or 6 o'clock in the afternoon. That dude was still there. Yeah. And then sometimes would be there until the overnight crew came in at about 9 to 10. I mean, these guys were working 13, 15-hour shifts a day. I mean, they get paid.
It's ridiculous.
But it's ridiculous, right?
It is.
They should be compensated for that time.
Workers' rights is something that we are severely lacking in this country as well. Whenever you see propaganda for things like right to work, you need to realize that that's, again, that spin that we talked about earlier. Right to work isn't the right of the worker.
Right.
They try to phrase it that way.
It's right for the employer to fuck the worker.
Right.
Exactly.
They're trying to get rid of unions, which this country was built on, quite frankly,
Worker
and really
protections.
needs a second wave of unions to come back into the workforce to help protect workers because so many workers are being disenfranchised and they don't realize it.
Yeah.
From Starbucks to Amazon.
So the next thing I'd like to do, and this might seem like an extreme ideal point, but I think this forces people to get an education about who they're voting for, and that is to remove all political party affiliation demarcation from election ballots. So the idea is you go to a polling place, You ask for a voting card, a ballot, and you receive one. And right now, everybody receives one with who's a Democrat, who's a Republican, so on and so forth. If they're incumbent, if they're not incumbent, we need to remove that from all ballots because that forces the citizens to be educated about who they're voting for. There are so many citizens
100%.
that have no idea of the candidates that they're voting for. They just strictly go in to vote in America
based on their party.
Straight party ticket, which is pathetic, quite frankly. It's sad. And I say as a guy who's obviously in my lifetime in voting, voted for many people that are left-leaning, whether they were an independent candidate or they were literally a Democrat. However, there are Republicans that I've voted for over time. For example, easy example to use here more recently, but Melissa Gilliam, we voted for her over Jared Maheron. He's fucking snake-ass weasel bitch who
should not have been in the Democratic Party to begin
absolutely.
with.
He was a fucking slimeball who was more akin to Trump's group, but it's neither here nor there. So we're going to remove party affiliation from ballots. Anybody got any opposing viewpoints on that?
No, I think that's a good point, and I'm glad to see, like, you know, with campaign posters and yard signs and stuff, you're not seeing a lot of a political affiliation like you used to. Like as far as like seeing, like, remember back in the day they would clearly have like a donkey.
It's an intentional strategy, though.
I know. I mean, it's a smart play on a political move.
Red, white, and blue.
Yeah.
So the candidates take that viewpoint, and that perspective, and that intent usually. Now, obviously, if they're at a political rally for Republicans, they're Republican and da-da-da.
Right.
But that being said, you know, again, it's obvious that they're taking that approach because they don't want people to know.
Right.
Because maybe there's a name or a brand familiarity. Really, in this area, they play on people's stupidity. They just lay these signs out in 10-mile stretches for candidates without any political affiliation on them.
If I can make a point on that, something that I think would be beneficial, every year we randomize the houses of Harry Potter, and we place a stamp of their house. Now, one year you may have a Joe Biden that has Slytherin. One year you might have one that's Snufflepuff or whatever the fuck that is. One year you might have a Gryffindor. I don't know. And you can make it a Monopoly game just like McDonald's. And you get enough Gryffindors.
Scratch a sniff.
You get them. And the snake it smells like straight asshole. It's weird.
Speaking of smelling like straight asshole, here's a word from our sponsors.
Brought to you by the Campaign for Linda Polson for Senate 2022.
Ron DeSantis, you have my vote, and I gotta tell you, I can't vote down there, but pretty soon my corpse is gonna be cremated. And I would just say, you can slip me in one of those ballot boxes, make me into a bout, and punch a bunch of holes in me. Punch all the holes you want. I gotta get them holes punched. So I just want to say, one last time, vote for Ron DeSantis. He gets the illegals and sends them up to the north to do... I actually am confused what he was trying to do.
Brought to you by the supporters of Linda Polson for Senate 2022.
Another political talking point here, we're going to do an outlawing of gerrymandering. Gerrymandering is one of the most criminal things that's going on in politics right now. The short of it is your politicians, almost every time Republican GOP candidates are redrawing district maps because they don't like that they lost and they want to change the rules to the game so they can win. And they often do very racist things when they're doing this, such as lump all the black people into one district with less representation, for example. This is why your polling places change about every 4 years. That is a direct result of your lawmakers gerrymandering. So I implore anybody who has had their polling places change very routinely here recently. I can speak for the St. Francis County here in southeast Missouri. Your county clerk is Kevin Engler, if you have questions for him.
He's closing a bunch of them, aren't they?
There has been many relocations. Just in the last 6 years of my voting, I have changed polling places 4 times.
Holy crap.
So
I'm kind of in a small lake community, so like I'm kind of out of town, so it's always the same place. But yeah, I did read something that he was trying to like close a bunch of different places and make people drive from different precincts into like one specific polling place. Like they eliminated a bunch of polling places.
And it has been proven time and time and again, the more difficult that you make voting, the less voting turnout there is, and the more divisive your elections are.
Yep.
And the more unhappy your constituents are. So let's get rid of the gerrymandering. This is a long overdue thing. This is something that's been talked about for decades, and it needs to stop. and it's going on aggressively. Florida is a state that it's going on in just rapidly all the time. I think I saw recently some studies on Texas in particular, Brandon, where you hail from, Arizona, a lot of southwestern states that's going on aggressively right now, especially a lot of the gentrification that's going on in places like New Mexico and Arizona, and some more historic areas and places where they're starting to build out communities and suburbs and from those major cities. That's alluring a lot of people to move to those more pleasant climates. There's a big wave of redistricting going on because it is a lot of left-leaning people that are coming in and influencing those more traditional Republican states and districts. So I think that that's going to bring us on to our next topic about elections and that sort of thing. And that is that we need to outlaw the ability of states to remove any and all candidates because they didn't qualify based on their criteria. So I'm talking third-party candidates
Right.
to be on the ballot. So not that I'm making a argument for this jackass who we can almost have an entirely another discussion about, which I don't care to. But if everybody remembers, Kanye ran for president in 2020, and he did not make the Missouri ballot. So you could not vote for Ye for president. But I respect that idiot's right to run for president.
Yeah.
Nonetheless.
Right.
And he should have been allowed to be on the ballot in Missouri. There was many other candidates in Missouri that I was never able to vote for as a third-party candidate option. And that right there tells you that the game is rigged, and that is why we are so locked into a two-party system in this country. That needs to end. That needed to end a long time ago. We as a country had more than a two-party system for well over 100 years. But again, more with this tribalism and finding out the game and rigging it even more so and playing by the rules and working within those loopholes, our politicians have gotten smarter, have figured out how to play the game, and things have been narrowed down to a two-party system almost. Well, I think it's fair to say over the last 100 plus years, it has been nothing but a two-party system.
Yeah, absolutely.
There's been some dents in the armor, if you will, from time to time, but it's all been a two-party system.
Especially on a federal level. Maybe on a local level, you may see some third-party candidates or something, but federally, it's been dominated by the two-party system.
Most importantly, though, your local offices, do not look past those.
Absolutely.
That is the beginning of democracy. That can be changed just as easily. You need to vote.
100%. And these are decisions that impact your everyday life as your local elections, your county elections.
Right.
State, it gets less and less, but don't get me wrong, states is equally impactful. And a lot of people do look to the federal government to solve their problems, and the answers aren't all at the federal level. We are presenting this conversation today as if we are running for president in a almost satirical fashion, but also at the same time, this is a serious talk today. So that being said, I think that it's important to address what we recognize as federal holidays. And Columbus Day in particular just needs to be completely removed from all of our lingo.
Oh, yeah.
And that needs to be replaced with Indigenous Peoples of North America Day.
Christopher Columbus, who never even stepped foot in the United States.
This is my ridiculousness. I thought it had already been changed.
I mean,
it has to a degree, but I don't think it's like a federally enforced thing.
Right. Like society has declared it Indigenous Peoples Day. Well,
I know that there's an Indigenous People Day in Canada specifically that's recognized. It's actually in the summer typically. June, I think. Yeah, June. But in the United States, I will say, like on Columbus Day this year, like, you know how Apple has little reminders of holidays and stuff. It actually popped up as Indigenous Peoples Day for us here in the United States. I think that tide has started to turn. And I know that, in 2021, Joe Biden formally commemorated the holiday within presidential proclamation beginning, and he's the first U.S. president to do so. But there's nothing that outright says that it's replacing Columbus Day, I don't believe.
Right.
So it's more of a sidestep. Does that make sense?
It's a growing number of states have begun to replace Columbus Day with an Indigenous Peoples Day.
You know, I think it's kind of one of those things. It's kind of, I hate that I'm even addressing this right now, but, you know, the Republicans and their agenda, of course, right now, and what we're teaching in school and their avoidance of the slavery education in this country,
right?
The disenfranchising of minorities in this country. This kind of goes into that as well. I've heard DeSantis specifically go on about Columbus. It's like, everybody wants to go on about him being a racist, blah, blah, blah. You know, why are we celebrating Columbus? The guy is clearly an idiot.
Imperialist.
He thought he was in the West Indies.
Yeah.
Whenever he hit the Caribbean islands.
Yeah.
He's not the first person that founded North America either. I mean, which is even a ridiculous thing that you would say because there's indigenous people that were here.
It was already founded.
But if you're talking about
Europeans,
Anglo-Saxons, Europeans, people that side of the world, Leif Garrett was the first one to, well before Columbus as well.
Well, and there's speculation there may have been, or
People
even
before
earlier
that.
contact.
And I have no
that.
doubt that there is.
Yeah.
It's just these are the documented examples that we're all aware of. So, but yeah, I think that just all mentions of Columbus just needs to be. I mean, that's the thing about America. That's what's been beautiful about America in some instances is we have learned over time. So, Juneteenth is finally a federally recognized holiday, which should have been a long time ago.
Right, as it should be. Right.
There needs to be something that specifically says this is the way that we used to be as a country, and we are no longer. And let's lift up this minority for so long.
But Barrett, what about our history?
Exactly.
What about our heritage?
Our history that we're so tied
Our
to.
heritage.
Somehow we're tied to this Spaniard that came over here. I don't even like Spain.
Fucking say it to Maria. Make Election Day a federal holiday. I think that goes without saying.
Yeah.
Oh my God, this is fucking.
I mean, come on. That's a no-brainer.
That should have been done.
It is in so many other countries. It's absurd that it's not.
Another tactic to stop poor people from fucking voting.
That's exactly what it is. So we just got a couple more items left on our list. So I just got to get our sponsors in one more time here. And we're going to pitch to our sponsors now.
Are you tired of those leftist snowflakes telling you how to run one up on the hole?
If there's grass on the field, play ball.
Herschel Walker, baby. Ah, fuck this. I ain't getting canceled. I'm out.
Thank you for that message from our sponsors. We're back with you. So this is going to be another hot topic, and that's going to be outlawing all high-capacity assault rifles and magazines.
Again, should have been done a long time ago. Common sense gun laws.
And we're not taking your guns.
And I'm pro-gun.
I'm a gun owner.
I'm pro-gun.
gun owner.
I think hunting...
I'm a gun owner too.
Yeah.
I think hunting is a necessity, especially in this country. There are animal populations that do overtake and become a nuisance. Deer in this state in particular. Wild boar is a thing in this state now.
If it's not controlled.
That's the reason there's hunting seasons in particular.
Conservation 101.
And that's a part of conservation is the ebbs and flows of the ecosystem. Listen, if we weren't on this planet and, farming is what's really kind of as a part of our technology development that's kind of made us a less nomadic people versus what we were innately. We hunted and gathered all the time.
Oh, yeah.
We hunted
That's how
for
humans
animals
survived the way they did.
constantly. Bludgeoning wasn't so much the more popular aspect of capturing our animals, but, fishing, bow hunting, that sort of stuff. Like we've been killing animals for a long time for human consumption and nutrition.
Right.
So us just to have it regulated by the conservation entities, I mean, again, it's a no-brainer. It's already a thing. But, that's definitely a necessity for guns there. Hunting rifles and things of that ilk.
That your inherent right of self-defense.
You do not need AR-15s. No. You do not need AK-47s to go and mow out deer. Okay? No. It's totally unnecessary. Now, I will say, as a person who shot an AR-15, it was fun. I enjoyed it personally.
Yeah, I did too. I love it. I've done it like a million times.
And I do see how the gun nuts power trip, based on it's kind of cool. It's kind of empowering. However, it's not necessary.
I'm fine with that too, as long as there's some kind of regulation with it. I mean, you have to have a driver's license to operate a fucking motor vehicle. You should have to have a license to operate a firearm that's designed to kill people.
And we talked about this on the show previously, like in Japan, like the vetting process that you have to go through just to get a handgun.
Right.
The months and months of... You have to be interviewed by police. Why do you want this?
Right.
Then there has to be an independent investigation from psychological experts. Then you have to take gun safety classes. Then you have to shoot that firearm. You have to have so many hours of practice. Then you're re-interviewed by the police again, and your results are reviewed by the police. And then you get a firearm.
And they make sure you're competent.
Yes. So I think that, yes, we're talking a handgun. Right. A handgun. We're talking like a 9mm.
Right. And, another thing, speaking of that, like in Texas, got to be 21 to fucking buy a handgun, but you could be 18 and buy an assault rifle.
the logic's totally backwards.
It doesn't make any sense to me.
And I'll call back to our episode with Skylar that we had here. Our conversation with Skylar Johnson. I think it was either episode 16 or 18 here on the ATI podcast.
Great guest.
And it was right after the Uvalde shooting as well, where we kind of got into the weeds with that. So if you kind of want to hear more of our stances on that and justifications for thereof, go back for that episode. So our last topic for the conversation today is legislation to enforce social media platforms operating in the United States to protect free speech if they're operating under the guise of a town square platform. So I know this is kind of a controversial topic, especially with some of my friends. A lot of people, listen, I was entertained as hell that Donald Trump got kicked off of Twitter. I thought it was hilarious. I loved every minute of it. I loved that it pissed him off. I love that it made him go waste a bunch of money to start another failed social media, Truth Social. I loved every minute of that from an entertainment perspective. However, I do not agree that he was kicked off of Twitter, as controversial as that might be.
I mean, if he really did violate their community guidelines and standards, I get it.
Yes. However,
as far as silencing him because they don't agree with his political agenda and his ideology, yeah, that's not,
I think anytime that you promote any kind of, at least from my standpoint, and I can't speak for the campaign, so this is me out back while I'm smoking out back, and I got several different minions. I'm like, just go do the fucking thing, Bill. God damn it! I've told you 6 times. Told you 6 times. And I'm just thinking to myself, and I'm just like, I forgot what I was getting.
Well, what your opinion is on Trump being banned from Twitter, essentially.
Here's my thing: is hate speech. And whenever you promote violence, that's the thing. If you say something that invokes or can invoke violence in others based upon your speech, like you got your Richard Spencers and your Milo Yiannopoulos and your fucking cunts. You take those motherfuckers off and let them go on their fucking freedom platform, whatever Trump started. Patriot fucking whatever. Fuck you. You're not a patriot.
Well, he's going to come back. You know that. Elon, he's got control now. You're villainous overlord. So.
I don't disagree with anything you're saying. Obviously, they all are shitty people and they suck. There's 2 points I'm going to make right now. First point is, actually I have 3. First point is, the Chinese government has an official Twitter account. The Russian government has an official Twitter account.
Yeah.
Let's talk about how evil that those entities, Saudi Arabia government has an official Twitter account.
Yeah.
They are allowed to promote their propaganda freely on Twitter, and Twitter has done nothing about that. Did nothing about that.
No, I agree.
So that's a huge issue.
You can't be so biased.
Right.
There is clearly a bias
choose.
in those decisions, or was. Now Elon Musk is in charge. Things are changing. I'm not saying I'm for it. Whatever, that'll play out. That's another discussion. I don't want to get on that. The other argument I'm going to make, Brandon, is I'm going to call back to your conversation earlier on and your positioning on the death penalty. And that is, who's making these decisions as far as what is hate speech? Now, I understand we can pull out a textbook and we can say, this is the definition of hate speech. But hate speech is viewed differently from culture to culture, ethnicity to ethnicity.
Different perspectives. Yeah.
Sexual orientation to sexual orientation.
Right.
Sexual preference to sexual preference. All of those things. So hate speech can be...
I would just say anything that we're talking about whenever it comes to violence specifically.
And then the third thing, again, as well, is that we have to show, and I kind of use this in my point 1, and that is there has to be a consistency in these decisions. And the minute that we start making biased decisions is the minute that we start turning into the Hitlers of the world and controlling speech and what free speech is.
100%. No fascists.
ACLU...
Yeah, you got to be careful with that.
Everybody needs to remember that the ACLU has defended the Ku Klux Klan dating back to even the 70s. Now, do we agree or support with anything that the KKK has to say or do? Absolutely not. But they do reserve the right to free speech in this country.
Right.
And the minute that they are limited of their free speech and they are allowed to do their rallies as long as they're peaceful and so on and so forth, just like anybody else. And listen, we know, we've talked about it on the show, we've done drive-bys and given those people our 2 cents and that sort of stuff. At the end of the day, they are allowed their free speech as it stands in this country.
Right. Yeah.
So we really have to
Yeah.
be.
Fair enough. And I'm fine with that. I think whenever it comes down to Proud Boys promoting violence, or the one percenters promoting violence, or even Antifa, if they are to promote violence, it's the same thing.
Right.
I don't know. I'm
Can't
pretty
pick and
pro
choose.
punching a Nazi in the face.
Oh, yeah.
Personally.
Oh, I'm all about punching a Nazi in the face. I'm anti-fascist as fuck, but on a different
I hear ya.
platform.
I hear
Right.
ya.
Right.
Not the organization.
Not an extremist level.
Yeah, fuck organizations. Groupthink is bullshit.
That's kind of my last big discussion topic. Does anybody else have anything they want to add?
No, I mean, I think our platform was pretty solid.
Yeah, and I think it's going to leave a lot for debate and discourse, if you will.
Yeah.
Good for good and for bad, perhaps.
Yeah.
And I think we've appealed at least somewhere on the aisle to everybody. Not maybe on all of these discussion topics, but certainly a fragment or a section thereof. Of course, that concludes this week, episode 41, ATI Podcast for President. On the next episode, we are going to have a return to pro wrestling. We got an independent wrestler on the show, String Bean. Now, you might remember Dr. Egon Casanova from early on in the show, the pro wrestling manager we had on. This is his client. And String Bean is also the LPW, or was, I should say, former LPW light heavyweight champion. He's going to be on the show. He's going to talk about his independent wrestling career and his vying back for the championship. So that should be an interesting conversation.
Is he in person or a call?
We're gonna have a call-in platform so we can get a good video feed.
I was going to
for
say,
folks.
this dude's a pretty massive guy.
Yeah, he's a big old boy. So that'll be a good talk. Looking forward to having that conversation with him. And for this week, I'm Barrett at Barry Insane on Instagram and Twitter. He's Brandon, a.k.a. Knobnard, a.k.a. Whole Boy from Knobnard's Closet and Ed Oz Imperious Emporium. You can follow Ed Oz Imperious Emporium on Instagram. And he's Josh Welch, _ Joshua Welch on Instagram. And
Yes,
we are
sir.
out of time. Until next time, good night and good luck.
Stay safe out there.
Hail Satan.
Drop me a beat. My pussy goes roundabout, my pussy goes roundabout, get y'all. My pussy goes roundabout, my pussy goes roundabout, get y'all. Vote for the Christ, vote for the Jesus. Vote for the Christ, vote for the Jesus. And sing it real nice. I think we all enjoyed that little prayer, but I will say I'm getting some kind of interference. Oh, good Lord, bring me down. Oh, why do I see fire? Why do I see fire and brimstone? Oh, Lord. My pussy goes roundabout, my pussy goes roundabout, get y'all. Snoop Dogg don't got shit on me, homie. Peace out.
Hey, this is Josh from ATI Podcast. For show updates and news about the podcast, follow us on social media. You can follow us on Facebook at facebook.com/ATI Podcast 22, on Twitter at podcast_ATI, on Instagram at the ATI Podcast, on TikTok at ATI Podcast. DMs are always welcome. Have a question for the show? You can always email us at atipodcastquestions@gmail.com. Stay safe out there.
This is Barrett from the ATI Podcast. Each week, Josh and I discuss current events, pop culture, music, TV, movies, politics, sports. Nothing is out of bounds. You can also tune in to learn about rising artists, small businesses. Whether it's music, graphic design, filmmaking, or even a brick-and-mortar mom-and-pop shop, we will be spotlighting folks and their endeavors. Listen to us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Amazon Music, Anchor, or anywhere you enjoy your podcasts. Just search ATI Podcast. We would like to thank you for your continued support, and as always, please stay safe out there.